Creative process overview. We're going to review how to complete the reflection in the 2D creative process packet. Go ahead and scroll or turn to your very last page on your creative process packet. You should have completed the self-assessment on the rubric on the second side where it says should be completed by the student by highlighting the appropriate boxes for each of the 5 categories. The final page is the project reflection, and I'm going to go through this step by step. After I go through each one of the questions, I will prompt you to pause the video so that you have time to fill it out before you move on to the next question. When you complete the project reflection, use complete sentences. I also have a reminder up at the top to photograph this page once it's completed, your thumbnail sketches, your final sketch, and your completed project before turning this packet in. This is because after you turn the packet in, I will be putting marks on it when I grade it, and it would be better to have your photographs be before it is marked up. Each one of these questions is aligned to the national standards. That's what the APS number is by each one. You do not need to worry about this. Just go ahead and read each one of the questions. The first question, did this project turn out as you had intended? What did you do in this project that was successful? And what might you do differently if you were to do this project again? Make sure when you answer this, you answer all parts of the question. Pause the video and complete the answer. The next question. When judging the artwork created for this project, what do you think should be the most important criteria and why? How would you assess your project according to your criteria? For this question, you've already been exposed to a lot of criteria. Criteria would include on the first page when you write down the project requirements. You can refer back to that and look at those criteria. Also, when you completed your self-assessment, the rubric contains 5 categories filled with criteria for the project. You may choose from any of those provided criteria, or you could come up with your own criteria that you think is important when assessing the project. And that is what you will use, and then you will talk about how well you think you did according to that criteria. An example could be creativity. If you think creativity was the most important criteria for this particular project and what it should be judged on or judged by the most, that's what you would say, and you would say why and how you think that you did according to that. Please pause the video and complete the answer to this question. Next question. What images have you been exposed to in your life that may have influenced or inspired your interpretation and execution of this project? How did they influence you? We have a visual storehouse of images in our brains. The more that we're exposed to, the more creative we are able to be. And it isn't just being exposed to lots of imagery and lots of artwork, but also being conscious of these images and how they influence and interpret other works of art. So it's really important to think about this when you are completing your projects, because nothing comes from nothing. We are all exposed to all kinds of imagery throughout the world, and the more that we're aware of that and conscious of it, the more creative and the better artists that we will be. So think about what things you've been exposed to. Sometimes it's actually the images that I give you when I'm showing examples. Sometimes it's imagery that you have seen on your own. Sometimes it's an ad in a magazine that you really like the photograph of. So it could be lots of different things. But I want you to think about this and be conscious of this when you are creating art. So go ahead and answer this question and pause the video. The next question, which elements of art and principles of design were focused on in your composition? Describe how they were used. You must include at least one element and one principle and examples and descriptions of each. So the elements and principles are the tools that we use to create artwork. The elements are the tools and the principles are how we use them. So if you look at the top of your page, I always have a little cheat up at the top with the elements of art and the principles of design, just to help remind you so you don't have to remember them. But then if you scroll to the next page or you turn to the back of your sheet, I always have the elements and principles with their definitions so you can go back and review those if you're not sure what they mean. So heading back to the question up here, you are going to take at least one of these elements and one of these principles and talk about how you use them in your artwork. If you recall, when we go back to the second page of your project plan, when you did your final sketch, you were to label how you were going to use the elements and principles in your design. So you are absolutely welcome to use exactly what you put on here when you wrote at the bottom how your elements and principles were used. But you also may refer to other ways as well. There are lots of different ways we use the elements and principles of art and design in our projects. For example, you could say that I use lines to create the texture in the grass, and I used the same lines throughout the piece to create unity and pull the whole project together. That would be an example. I use unity, I use line, and I use texture. So when I'm grading this, I am looking for you to actually use the art vocabulary in the top. I'm looking for you to use one element of art and one principle of design, and then I expect you to explain how you were used, how they were used in your artwork. So go ahead and pause the video and answer this question. Next question. How did you use the elements of art to apply or connect the principles of design? Be specific, using examples of the elements and principles vocabulary and how they were used in your artwork. This question is very similar to the previous question, but it requires a little bit higher level of thinking and understanding the elements of art and principles of design. Like I said previously, the elements are the tools that you use to create art, and the principles are how you use them. They're different rules that you can use to try to create successful art. And so they are always used to, the elements are always used to create the principles. So understanding how that happens and then being able to write about it does require that little bit better understanding. So when I answered the previous question, I did actually connect the two. But let's go ahead and give another example. Okay, let's pretend that I have a road that was going back into space in my composition, so it was actually narrowing as it went back in space. And then at that back area, let's pretend I had a sunset that was back there. Okay, so by having the merging lines of my road that go back into space, I create emphasis on the sun that those lines lead your eye to. That would be an example. I'm actually connecting two elements with a principle there, but you really would only need one. Previously, I talked about how I use the same lines throughout the composition to create unity and pull my composition together. That is also an example of what you could write, but you have to talk about how you use the elements to create the principles. So look at your composition and look at the elements. Look at how you use them to create either unity, balance, contrast, emphasis, movement, pattern, or rhythm. And again, if you need to review any of that vocabulary, you can flip to the back of your sheet. Okay, go ahead and pause the video and answer this question. Finally, the last question here. What did you learn about art, life, or yourself by doing this project? And then I have here, if nothing, you did not put enough of yourself into the project to earn the points. So for this question, when you're going to put a significant amount of time into an art project, you really should be gaining something from it. That's the point. Sometimes you are really growing artistically in the ways that I plan for you to grow based on the lesson. And so you might have grown in your shading skills, you might have grown in your understanding of depth or perspective. There could be lots of things that I intend for you to learn, but oftentimes just going through the process allows you to learn things about yourself or your peers, maybe going through a critique process or working next to somebody. So it could be something totally unrelated to art, but I want you again to be conscious of how you are growing as a person or an artist during the process of your art making. Go ahead and pause the video and answer this question. Finally, I do have a spot for other comments. This question is not required. But this is a great place for you to write things down that you want me to know when I'm assessing your project. If you had to start over once or twice and want me to know that you did that, if something in particular challenged you or you were frustrated with something, or maybe you absolutely loved this project, this was your favorite project, anything like that, you could add to the comments section right here. The rubric at the bottom is what I give you your score on, so you do not need to do anything else in the packet to complete it. So go ahead and finish the packet, and when you are done, again, make sure that your packet is totally completed, photographed, and attached to your artwork and turned into the basket on the side of the room.